Hey, I'm Daniel and welcome back to another Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era video, and today I would like to give you a quick campaign summary of Heroes of Tamriel. Now, I did a video back in October with my honest thoughts and kind of first impression about the campaign as a whole, but since then, throughout the campaign, they've added tons of new stuff. Specifically, a bunch of new skill lines and classes were added as stretch goals. So here in this video, I thought it might be a good idea to just list everything together and break down every new skill line and class by expansion, just for your convenience. And even though the campaign has finished, but the late pledge manager is still open, and it will likely still be open probably until summer of 2026. So we still have plenty of time, and I hope this video will help you decide which expansion is right for you. So come over to my computer and let's have a look together. So we're looking at the summary page that I created in Notion, and by the way, I'll probably share this whole page with you in the video description, so make sure to find that link if you want to just scroll through the page yourself at your own pace. But nevertheless, this is the Heroes of Tamriel campaign summary, and here first in this first section I've included some of the new gameplay stuff. I just literally scrolled through the all unlocked stretch goals and tried to sum every component together. I did my best, but keep in mind that the final component count still may be a little bit different in the final production copy, but nevertheless I hope those numbers still will give you kind of good overall feel of what's coming. Specifically about the characters, we've got 11 new skill lines and 15 new classes. I mean, those two things alone, that is pretty much the equivalent of the base game, just content wise. This is just absolutely massive. 11 skill lines, 15 classes, 20 new race sheets with new art and racial abilities, as well as of course some enemy chips, quest enemy chips, adventure chips, and all those cards, counts and all of that. But now let me scroll a little bit down below here to the first expansion, Heroes of Tamriel expansion, and let's see what new skill lines and classes specifically were added as stretch goals. So as you can see, every skill line and class that has SG in the parentheses, that means it was added unlocked as a stretch goal throughout the campaign. And so this is why I haven't even had a chance to talk about this stuff in all of my previous videos, because it was not revealed back then, but now we do have, and now so let's see what's here. So in the Heroes of Tamriel expansion, I would probably say even before skill lines and classes, just those 20 new race sheets alone adds so much to the modular nature of the game, to the build's variety, because all of those racial abilities, they are pretty impactful, and they do change the way you approach your character creation, because they add a lot new synergies to specific other abilities or effects. Sometimes they can cover certain weaknesses, again, to create more combos, more synergies. So again, I just can't stress enough how good is that to have more alternative racial abilities. Not even mentioning the art, of course, thematically is also lovely, but even from the build variety perspective, I think like those race sheets alone are massive. But of course, let's check out the skill lines and classes. So this dual wield skill line is a skill line from the warrior constellation. It is associated with stamina, it requires light weapon battle form, and it has 12 dice in the supply, which means it is effectively a full-fledged starting damage dealing skill line, which is fantastic. Not only more options when you create a new character, but I think this specific dual wielding and a class fantasy is not present in the base game at all. So if you ever wanted to create a character with kind of like 2 daggers, 2 swords, kind of like a thief archetype maybe character, this is the skill line you want, and it has pretty interesting mechanics of double strikes and with some other dice increasing the damage of other dice without the skill line. So there's a lot of kind of internal synergy within the skill line itself, which is always a good thing. I love it. Now next, in Stormcalling, it's a mage and magicka type skill line that has 8 dice, so it's more like a supplementary, like a secondary skill line, and I think the way it works is very unique. You can think about this skill line thematically as your buffs, that you're buffing up your character and you're placing those dice on top of your character chip, and if you want to maintain those buffs, you need to pay the cost, which I think is just brilliant by design. But probably the main thing I love about this skill line is that it introduces a lot of synergy with combat skill dice specifically, which I think were a little bit underwhelming in the base game, but here we'll probably see this as a general theme among many skill lines and classes in these expansions, and Stormcalling is definitely one of them. Now, Green Balance skill line, something that was added as a stretch goal. I have not seen the final version of this skill line, so I cannot say much about it, but I do know that it's a thief constellation associated with stamina, and you can use this in any battle form, which usually is a quite big deal. And I would say all of those Thief Constellation skill lines. They're usually not very strong on their own, but because they're so flexible, because they don't require any battle form, you can usually so easily integrate them with other builds, and this is where they usually shine. And I believe this Green Balance, because it has 8 dice, is a more like, again, a secondary supplementary skill line that is focused around healing, which is not something we've seen before specifically for stamina, because previously if you want to heal, your only option was frankly Restore and Light, which again is a magicka type skill line, but this one being able to heal even on a pure stamina build, this is not something we've seen before, so this is awesome. But now moving on to the classes, I mean, you just look at that. We had only Warrior and Witch Hunter initially announced as part of this expansion, but you look at that now, we've got 4 more additional classes added as stretch goals, bringing the total new number of classes to 6 in this expansion, which is just absolutely massive, honestly. And just to give you a quick rundown, Warrior is a very beginner-friendly, kind of like a jack-of-all-trades type of class that can use pretty much any physical battle form, I believe all 4 of them in fact, which are light weapon, heavy weapon, ranged and defense, everything except magic, and it's a pretty strong, pretty easy to play class, so it's good to have something like that in the roster. Now next, the Witch Hunter is definitely a little bit more complex class, and as a matter of fact, I have played the entire campaign showcasing this specific class, so definitely check out my playthrough if you have not seen it before. And my first impression, even before recording that playthrough, was very positive about Witch Hunter, and I still think it is an amazing class even after playing the full campaign with this class. Specifically about reusing potions, I think this is just so strong. It adds so much flexibility to this class and so much unique flavor. I love it. Now for all other classes that was added as stretch goals, frankly, I don't have a lot of information. I mean, I do of course know certain things, but I'm not sure if those things are still final, so I'm probably not gonna share and talk about all the new stretch goal classes too much, but just as a general theme, for example, Outlaw has a unique mechanics called contract cards, and at the beginning of a session you draw and choose a contract, and if you manage to fulfill that contract without your session, then you get a certain benefit, but if you don't, as you can imagine, there's gonna be some sort of penalty, some sort of debuff, not only for you but probably for your entire party, so that will be pretty fun. Battle Mage has a pretty unique twist with a lot of drain dice that you drain in dice but also then deal more damage the more drain dice you have on your class sheet, and there is also quite a lot of synergy between different battle forms, so even though it is a mage constellation class, it uses some melee battle forms, which again something we haven't seen before, and usually I quite like those kind of crossovers between different archetypes or themes, so pretty interesting to try that one. Swashbuckler uses their own unique components, which are tokens kind of similar to Arcanist tokens, and they also sit in your active slots, and depending on the number of those components, I believe they call Moxie tokens, you're able to perform your certain class abilities, so there's a lot of interaction going on there, like its own little mini game, kind of again like with the Arcanist, with the Necromancer, Necrosis stack, and all those classes that use different components as a sort of additional cost for their abilities. They're usually pretty fun to play. And Commander is another kind of summoner class, but with a very unique twist, which is very different from the Necromancer and Warden in a way that you can advance stats for your own summon, which is pretty unique. I'm personally looking forward to playing Commander, just trying to see how far I could push building my summon, my companion, to buff it up, maybe to 6 combat. I mean, that would be ridiculously fun, but yeah, I'm looking forward to trying that new summoner, but from the warrior perspective rather than or the mage perspective that we've seen before. And so that is the Heroes of Tamriel package with 20 new race sheets, 3 new skill lines, and 6 new classes. Now let's move on to the Summerset expansion, which has 3 skill lines and 3 classes, and 1/3 of which were announced as a stretch goals. So we'll get 1 additional skill line and 1 additional class that were not available during my recording of the first impression of this expansion. So Eslweyr Spear is another starting skill line, as you can see, with 12 dice. And so now we have another good healthy alternative to two-handed skill line, because they both do require heavy weapon battle form. But a unique twist to Eslweyr Spear is that again it utilizes a lot of synergy with combat dice, and you can also deal damage up to your magic stat. So it's a melee battle form, but you can kind of shoot your spear in range, I guess. Presume that how it works thematically, but nevertheless it's a very unique skill line with a lot of synergy, so that's a big thumbs up for me. Next is Assassination, which is another skill line from the 5th constellation, which means you can use them in any battle form, which again opens up a lot of flexibility in the synergies with other skill lines. And my first impression of the Assassination skill line was very positive. I think it does exactly what you would expect from the Assassination skill line, so yeah, can't complain on that. And now the new skill line that was announced as a stretch goal, Herald of the Tome. Interestingly, it has 12 dice in the supply, which means it is effectively another starting damage dealing skill line, which is fantastic. I honestly did not expect that, and I frankly don't know much about this skill line either, but it is another 12 dice skill line, so I think this is awesome. Now for the classes, Mage is something similar to the Warrior class in a way that it's pretty beginner friendly, but oh my, this class is so powerful. It can treat your magic stat as stamina, which means you can effectively untrain stamina entirely if you want to, and just go full on the complete magic shenanigans. It can reroll the dice, it can deal some true damage, it has crowd control. I think this class is just so ridiculously powerful, but kind of in a good and a fun way, so I love it. Assassin is a pretty interesting one, because if you look at the novice side of this class, it does look extremely underwhelming at first. But I think once you upgrade it to the master side, this is where the name of this assassin class starts to make sense, because yeah, it does exactly what you expect, and it has their unique components for their assassination stack. I believe they call it focus stack, again, which is similar to the necrosis stack of the necromancer, that you build up this resource and then you can spend them on more powerful abilities, and that always feels nice. You do feel clever when you pull up those things, and it's always a good thing in a class design. I love it, and yeah, that's probably one of the most impactful must upgrade, because yeah, assassin on the novice side, but assassin on the master side, so fun and so powerful. And quartermaster is a new class announced as a stretch goal. It has a lot of synergy with items, it can reuse items and focus on their overtax effects, which is obviously very strong, very flexible. I'm a big fan of that. Kind of like Witch Hunter focuses on their reusability of potions, and quartermaster reuses some other weapons and armors. Yeah, very flexible, very powerful class. Even though I don't know much about it, I haven't played it obviously, but from what I can tell, this must be very fun. And so that was this Summerset expansion. Again, 3 new skill lines, 3 new classes. Now let's move on to the next expansion, Elsweyr, which uses the same kind of formula of 3 new skill lines and 3 new classes. And again, a third of this was announced and revealed as stretch goals, so I haven't talked about them before. But for Soul Magic specifically, it's another Magicka type dice with 12 dice in the supply, and I played this skill line as part of my playthrough where I played Witch Hunter, and oh my goodness, this skill line is so much fun. You can pull absolutely crazy shenanigans if you set things up right, even though this does require a lot of setup when you do something powerful like that. But the payoff is so satisfying. I'm a huge fan of this Soul Magic skill line. I think it's designed just absolutely beautifully, and it's just so much fun playing this skill line. Next we have medium armor, and I must say my first initial impression was a little bit mixed. I thought this skill line just a little bit underwhelming, but at the same time it is the first skill line that can reliably prevent a lot of damage while not cluttering your cooldown track, unlike heavy armor and acrobatics. So the way you place those dice in your active slots, you free up space in your cooldown track, and not only that, the whole kind of point of this skill line is to keep your cooldown track as lean as possible, to have as fewer dice in your cooldown track as possible, which as you can imagine will likely lead to more damage, because again your cooldown track is not cluttered with all dice that would normally prevent damage, again like heavy armor or acrobatics. I still don't know how actually powerful this end up be, but I'm looking forward to trying. And now we've had Ardent Flame, which is a new skill line in the ranged battle form, which means we finally have an alternative to bow. Now I must say this Ardent Flame is not something I would expect when I was even trying to think what potentially other skill line in the ranged battle form could look like. I've been thinking about crossbow or maybe something along those lines, but Ardent Flame is a whip, and it's more like a medium range crowd controlling kind of thing. Again, I have not played this, I have not seen the final version of this skill line, but it does look pretty interesting for sure. Now for the classes, the first one we have Berserker, and the unique twist of this class is that every turn you roll a d6, your rage die, and depending on the number rolled, you must use your class ability. And this class abilities, sometimes you may not always want to use them, because you may sometimes push your ally across the whole map or run in a completely different direction. So as you can probably expect thematically from Berserker, it's just a complete chaos, which is I guess fun on its own. Now, for the next class, Thief, as you can expect from this name, there is a lot of synergy with items, that you use your items to prevent damage, and this is probably one of the best classes when it comes to positioning and mobility in general. Just somehow all of those Thief type classes, they end up very strong. I mean, if you look just at the Acrobat or Rogue, and now we have Thief, I think they are all very strong, and Thief is probably going to be among one of the strongest classes, I can presume. This is really amazing. Now Primalist, which is another new class that was added through the stretch goals, and it is effectively a shaman from World of Warcraft, at least the way I think about it thematically, because it places totems, and those totems, they can do different things. They can either damage enemies or can help your allies, so you're playing as a sort of support but crowd controlling but still dealing damage. I'm a big fan of such flexibility and different kind of choose your play style. I think this is just really good, and it's a very unique twist, and this is what I love about the design. Pretty much every new class that we've seen so far, because they do add something new, something that hasn't been ready-made in other classes. So yeah, this Primalist looks very interesting to me, and I'm looking forward to trying it. And so that was Elsweyr expansion. Again, 3 new skill lines, 3 new classes. Now let's move on to the Fur and Fang expansion, which as you can imagine has a Fur and Fang 2 new skill lines, but also 3 new classes, which all of them were added through stretch goals. And I remember when I was talking through my first impressions of this campaign and this expansion in particular, and I was talking about the price that this package of Fur and Fang costs $20 for 2 skill lines, which I said, if you look at the per component count, this is actually quite pricey. But personally, I'm okay with paying $20 for 2 new skill lines, and hell yes, and happy to do this again. But since then, since they added 3 new classes to the same package for the same price, I mean, this is just huge value in my opinion. That is a lot of new content to explore, a lot of new synergies to try for such a small package. I think this does look great. But let's talk about the skill lines. Werewolf, as you can expect, is a quite big thing. It's a quite impactful skill line, quite unique skill line in a way that you need to transform to werewolf, which means to place your transformation die in the active slot before you can use anything else. And while you are transformed, you cannot use anything except a werewolf and combat skill dice, which adds a lot of limitations first, but it actually opens up so many synergy. And again, we're talking about synergy with combat dice again. This is just another example, and I think because you can use the werewolf skill line in all melee battle horns, which means the light weapon, heavy weapon and defense, you can probably already have an idea of certain classes that might work with this skill line. And of course, let's not forget about the vampire skill line, which again I tried in my playthrough with the witch hunter and soul magic, and I also used vampire this skill line, and oh my goodness, it is so good. And once again, because it's a thief skill line that you can use in any battle form, I think this little skill line just even on its own adds so many to the build variety, because you can use this as an extra healing if you need to, you can use this as a little bit of extra control, as survivability if you want to, or even as a little extra mobility depending on what your class needs, depending on what your character is lacking. The flexibility of the vampire skill line I think is just absolutely amazing really, and I would say that those 2 skill lines are definitely very unique in the way they designed, not something we've seen before. Now for those 3 new classes, I honestly can't say much. I do have a rough idea what they do, but from what I've seen and heard, that they've been slightly tweaked quite recently. I mean, after the campaign already finished. For example, this Lamp Knight was initially certain synergy with the afflicted keywords, which are used in both of their werewolf and vampire skill lines, but then I heard that they removed that, so I'm not sure what those classes actually do now, except maybe for Fear Mage, which uses a lot of status dice and can spread a lot of statuses and detonate them and deal some damage based on the number of statuses on the enemy chips, and it can even apply fear to other units more reliably, which is a very powerful effect as you can imagine. So yeah, I cannot say much about those classes, but I think this little package of Fur Fang expansion is a fantastic value for this price. And finally, onto the Shadows of Oblivion expansion with its Daedric Princess. There were initially 5 Daedric Princes announced, but with the stretch goals we're now seeing 2 extra added, Perite or Perite, how you pronounce this, as well as Clavicus Vial. And in case you don't know, the Daedric Princes, the way they work, they each have a blessing and a curse, kind of like a positive effect and a negative effect, and by default you need to use both if you want to add this Daedric Prince to your campaign, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. You can only choose to add a blessing or only a curse, depending on whether you want to make the game easier or harder, but I think adding both blessing and a curse is a lot of fun, honestly. So far in my little demo pack I have the only Daedric Prince, Hermos Mora, which has a blessing of extra reward, and reward is an existing keyword which allows you to gain other 5 tenacity or legendary item or advance a health stat for free, which is honestly amazing, but for the curse of encountering stronger enemies, and they are really scary, especially if you're playing with multiple adventurers, because they all have a keyword cornered, so their health is scaling with the number of players, and those enemies, they are really strong. The next Daedric Prince is Merun's Dagon, which has a blessing of having stronger combat dice, and oh my, this adds so much to the viability of pretty much every combat focused build. I mean, even from the base game, classes like Dragon Knight, for example, with molten weapons, or a lot of other skill lines and classes that we've seen across this campaign that also have synergy with combat dice. I mean, with those Merun Dagon with stronger combat dice, this can be so powerful. And if I'm not mistaken, all this stronger version of the combat dice, they have one face that deals 3 damage, 2 faces with 2 damage, 2 with 1 and 1 miss, with each combat dice dealing 1 extra damage or up to 2 extra damage. damage is a massive deal. And again, it opens up so much more synergy and viability of those combat focused builds. Now, for the curse, for the negative side of this Daedric Prince, you have more fatigue to deal with. And the way it's implemented, again, it's so clever that in order to clear up that fatigue from a separate stack, you need to visit either more towns or peaceful encounters. So again, it incentivizes you to have more variety in your plays. So you're not just going from one battle to another, you also have now more reason to do some other type of encounters, which is brilliant. I love the way those Daedric Princes, they change the way you approach your campaigns. I think this is probably the biggest strength of this expansion as a whole, as a theme. And for the next Daedric Prince, we have Shaggorath, which as a blessing have Gibberin enemies, which are kind of goofy, weaker types of enemies, which are replacing certain enemies from the bag. So you're making the game easy by adding those enemies. But for the curse, you've got cheese, which is kind of the alternative version of the normal fatigue dice. But instead of taking them from the supply, you would draw them from that special cheese bag. And if you get this cheese cube instead of fatigue, it's just much harder to get rid of. So again, it incentivizes you to do some other actions that you probably wouldn't do otherwise. Now for the next Daedric Prince, Sanguine, as a blessing, we've got mythic items, and they don't call mythic, but this is just the way I like to call them because they are very high tier items. They are unique items, way stronger even than the legendary items. I think they officially called Dealer's Fate or something like that, but I call them mythic items for simplicity. But as a curse, you get hedonism tokens, which are cluttering your adventurer mat basically, and you need to spend some experience to untrain them first before you can free up those slots to train anything else on those slots. But if you manage to get through that, and you will have those mythic items, they are just bonkersly strong. And now for the next Daedric Prince, Azura, as a blessing, we've got stronger guild effects, even though we haven't seen them yet, so I'm not sure if they're actually stronger or just a little bit different, like alternative versions, although I presume they're a little bit stronger, because that's kind of the whole point of those Daedric Princes, right? But as a curse, you're dealing with much more nastier and worse status and native skills, and they are really nasty, so I hope those guild effects, they will provide enough power to offset that. But yeah, we now basically have a whole alternative set of native abilities, which is just awesome really, and it's just from this one single Daedric Prince alone. And of course, don't forget you can combine all those Daedric Princes together if you want to get completely crazy. Nothing technically stop you from that. And now on to two Daedric Princes that were announced as a stretch goals, Pirite or Pirate. We actually don't know what it does blessing wise, and as a curse, we've seen only Plague Chips, even though I don't know what they do frankly. And for the last one, Clavicus Vial, we don't know probably any information, not blessing and not curse, so I don't know what they do. But looking at all other Daedric Princes, I'm sure there's gonna be some fun as well, something fun and interesting for sure. And I must say this Shadows of Oblivion expansion just quickly became probably one of my favorite things among this whole campaign. I mean, all of those Daedric Princes, they add so much and they change not only the way you approach your characters, but the way you approach the whole campaign as a whole, I would say. And so what would be my recommendation as a buyer's guide, if you will, because I've got some people ask me what I would recommend, so there you have it, as a buyer's guide. For those who are getting started, who are interested in the Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era but have not played it and don't own a base copy of the game yet, my honest recommendation is to just really buy the base game directly from the ChipTV game web store. You don't really need to back it during the campaign, because even though yes, you get a second printing during the campaign, but the changes are really minor, and keep in mind that even the base game alone offers tons of content. And even though yes, the character building is a little bit sort of limited by the number of available skill dice, it is still a plenty and for dozens of hours, if not hundreds of hours of gameplay just from this base game alone. So that's my just honest recommendation for new players. Don't back anything yet, just grab the base game. It is a plenty already. Now to the next category of players who already have the base game and want more character variety, my personal recommendation would be to grab the Heroes of Tamriel as well as Fur and Fang. I think these two boxes provide the most character variety, especially for the price. I think the value of those boxes for the amount of stuff they provide character-wise is just really fantastic. And between the two, I would say Heroes of Tamriel provide even more, not only because there are more classes, but also the racial abilities. This is just really, don't underestimate how impactful those things are. But of course, both of these packs, Heroes of Tamriel and Fur and Fang, I think they're just awesome as a character variety packs. Now, moving on next, if you want a little bit more fresh campaign experience, if you want even every end game to feel a little bit different, not just from your character perspective, but from encounters perspective and the way you approach your overland movement and priorities and things of that sort, I would say Shadows of Oblivion expansion really delivers on that. I think they really do add a lot of interesting decisions that go beyond your character, just more strategy-wise, more decision space-wise, and just fun-wise. I think this expansion is brilliant. Now, for those who want to expand the world, obviously the region expansions are all great. played. If I would have to choose, I would probably start with Elsweyr, then Summerset, and then Valenwood in that particular order, but that's just my personal recommendation, my personal preference, based on the skill lines and classes from those expansions, even though again they're all awesome. And of course each of those expansions, they provide more than just skill lines and classes. You get a whole new regions, a whole new gazetteers, a bunch of quests and side quests and enemy chips and items and side quests and whatnot. So yeah, all of those expansions, they're really expanding the world, so it depends on whether it's something you want. And of course, if you are already a fan of the game, if you played for hundreds of hours and you still want more, then I would say going all in is really reasonable in this case. And that is honestly not something I would normally say for most other games, but again, because of the modular structure of the game, because of how easily integrated those parts, I think you just gain a lot of value by adding more content and mixing and matching all of those classes and skill lines and regions and experience this world of Tamriel in just completely different ways. But hey, that's again only assuming that you already enjoying the game and you played it and you still want more. Then I genuinely think that everything from this campaign is genuinely good. But I do want to emphasize that if you have not played the Elder Scrolls before, then scroll up and go to my first recommendation, which is getting started, which is to grab just the base game directly from the web store or from your local shop even. You don't really need anything from this campaign if you're just getting started. And well, I guess that would be the wrap of this campaign summary. I hope this video helped you decide which expansion is the right for you, if any at all. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I'll put a link to this Notion document in the video's description so you can read it at your own pace if you need to. And yeah, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.